Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're really digging into this book, Finish What You Start, by Peter Hollins. I think our listeners will really connect with it, especially those who are looking for those solid strategies, things they can actually put into practice. It's all about finally reaching those goals that, well, maybe we've been putting off for a while.
You hit the nail on the head. This book doesn't just throw out advice, it digs into why we struggle with follow-through in the first place. It's like peeking into your own brain and figuring out how to rewire it for success.
One of the coolest things I found was this idea of a follow-through robot. Hollins breaks down how to follow through on anything into 4 parts. He compares them to a robot. Focus is the head, self-discipline is the spine, taking action is like the limbs, and persistence is the heart.
Yeah, it's such a great visual. And just like a robot needs all its parts working, we need all those elements to really make things happen. You need that clear direction from focus, that backbone of self-discipline. You got to take action to actually move forward, and then persistence to keep going when things get tough.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think we've all been there, right? We start with good intentions, and then, well, we trip ourselves up. The book calls these inhibiting tactics, and I have to admit, I was surprised by how many I actually do.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the biggest ones is setting bad goals.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you ever set a goal that was so vague you didn't even know where to start?
Oh, all the time.
Well, that's a classic bad goal. It's like trying to build a house without a blueprint. You're basically setting yourself up for failure right from the beginning.
That's so true. It's got to be specific, right?
Right. The book talks about setting SMART goals.
Yeah.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. It's about knowing exactly what you're going for and how you'll track your progress.
It's like having that clear roadmap.
Exactly. Now, another thing the book tackles head-on is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of failure. I mean, these are so common and they can completely paralyze us.
It's like that example in the book, Lara, the volunteer. She's got this amazing idea for a fundraiser, but she's terrified to share it. She's so worried about what people will think. I think we can all relate to that.
Totally. That feeling of putting yourself out there and risking rejection, it's tough. But the book really emphasizes everyone feels this. The key is learning to work through it. It gives you actual strategies, like changing how you think about those negative thoughts and focusing on the good that can come from just taking action.
One strategy I thought was genius was temptation bundling. It's basically connecting something you want to do with something you need to do.
Oh, yeah, that one's great. The book uses this example of someone who loves listening to music, but they also need to carve a wooden canoe. Like, that's not the most exciting task, right?
Yeah, not exactly a party.
So they decided to listen to their favorite albums while carving. It actually made the whole experience enjoyable.
So they're getting stuff done and having fun. That's amazing. Is there actually research to back this up?
That's the best part. There is. It's not just some trick. It's a real way to kind of hack your motivation and get things done. Pretty cool, right?
Super cool. All right, so we've talked about setting good goals and overcoming those fears that can hold us back. What about actually getting started and staying on track? Especially when, motivation can be a bit, well, unreliable.
That's where systems come in. The book talks about how willpower alone just isn't enough. Especially when we're tired or stressed, we need something to fall back on.
Like having a support system for your willpower. I love that idea.
Yeah. And one of the systems the book suggests is this idea of a manifesto. It lays out these rules to make following through more, well, automatic.
So less relying on willpower and more on having a plan.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful rules is setting a limit of just 3 daily tasks. That way you avoid feeling overwhelmed and can really put your energy into what matters most.
I need that. It's so easy to get caught up in that feeling of having to do everything at once, focusing on just 3 things. That feels so much more manageable.
Right. And it ties into this idea the book talks about separating what's important from what feels urgent. Sometimes the thing that's screaming for your attention isn't actually that crucial in the long run. It's about learning to prioritize based on what will have the biggest impact, not just what feels loudest.
That's a good point. I know I get distracted by urgent things all the time, but it's the important ones that actually move the needle.
Precisely. And it can be tough to train ourselves to think that way. But once you start, it can be really freeing.
All right, so we've got our goals, we're managing our time, but sometimes, well, things just feel hard. Like, I know I personally shy away from discomfort, but the book actually talks about becoming comfortable with discomfort. How does that even work?
It might sound counterintuitive, right? But the book argues that if you really want to grow, you got to step outside your comfort zone, and that's going to be, well, uncomfortable. It's like, think about learning a new language or taking a challenging class. Those things are tough. But the benefits, those last way longer than the temporary discomfort.
It's like the discomfort is the price you pay for the reward.
Exactly. And that mindset shift can be applied to so many things in life.
So how do we actually beat procrastination? Like, are there any concrete strategies? Because I think we all struggle with that.
Oh, definitely. The book has some great tips. One is breaking down tasks into those small, easy increments. Because let's face it, starting something big can feel super daunting, right? But if you can make that first step feel tiny, well, it's much easier to take action.
That reminds me of that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Exactly. The book uses this example of writing a 100-page document. Instead of focusing on the whole thing, which can feel terrifying, you just focus on one paragraph at a time. 100 words. That feels way more doable, right?
Way more. So it's about making it feel less overwhelming.
Exactly. And speaking of overwhelm, there's this other concept the book talks about, attention residue. Have you ever noticed how when you switch between tasks, you feel kind of mentally drained, like you can't fully focus?
Oh yeah, all the time, especially with all the distractions we have nowadays.
Well, that's attention residue. It's this idea that when you switch between tasks, a little piece of your attention stays stuck on that previous task.
Like mentally, we haven't fully switched gears.
Exactly. It's like constantly switching gears in a car. It wears down the engine and makes the ride bumpy.
That explains so much.
And the book offers some great tips for minimizing that attention residue, like grouping similar tasks together, minimizing those distractions, and creating a space dedicated to work.
So it's about being intentional with our attention, like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And remember those inhibiting tactics we discussed at the beginning? Well, the book takes that a step further with the idea of a don't-do list.
A list of things not to do. That's interesting. We're always told what to do, but this is like intentionally choosing what to avoid.
Exactly. It's about protecting your focus and energy. The book suggests putting things on there, like, oh, tasks that are stuck waiting for someone else, or maybe things that just aren't a good use of your time right now.
So it's like decluttering your mental to-do list.
Exactly. It's about setting those boundaries for your attention so you can really focus on what matters.
Love that. So speaking of focus, there are times when I really struggle with making decisions. I overthink everything. Does the book address that?
Oh, absolutely. Overthinking is a big one. And the book offers this really cool tool called the 40-70 rule.
Okay, what's that?
It basically says the best time to take action is when you have between 40-70% of the information you need.
So not waiting until you have everything figured out?
Right, because that can lead to analysis paralysis. You just get stuck thinking and never actually do anything. But on the flip side, you don't want to jump in with too little information either.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. The book gives us a great example of opening a bar. You're ready to open when you have about 50% of the liquor you want in stock.
That makes sense. You have enough to get started, but you're not waiting for absolutely everything to be perfect.
Exactly. It's a great reminder that perfectionism can actually hold us back. Sometimes good enough is good enough, and it's better to just get started and learn as you go.
Okay, that's really helpful. Now, this one might sound a little strange, but the book also talks about the importance of doing nothing. I'm curious, how does that fit into being productive?
It might seem counterintuitive, right? But it's all about giving your mind a chance to recharge. The book is talking about mental downtime, like taking a walk, maybe daydreaming, or just letting your mind wander.
So those moments when we're not actively focused on a task.
Exactly. And the book explains how those moments can actually spark creativity and new insights. It's like your subconscious mind is working in the background, making connections you might not have seen before.
Wow, that's amazing. I never thought about it that way. So it's not really doing nothing. It's like actively allowing our minds to rest.
Precisely. And that can be incredibly beneficial for productivity in the long run.
All right, so we've been talking about all these cool concepts, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Can you remind us about some of those key terms like time inconsistency? I think we mentioned that earlier.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Time inconsistency is this idea that our brains tend to prioritize the immediate reward. Like right now, even when the long-term reward is actually way better for us.
It's like that battle between our present self and our future self, right?
Exactly. Our present self wants that cookie or wants to scroll through social media, but our future self knows we should be eating healthy or working on that project.
And then we've got productive paranoia, which sounds a little intense.
It does, but it's actually about harnessing the power of what-if thinking. Like, what if this goes wrong? And then using that not to freak out, but to motivate yourself to prevent those bad outcomes.
So a little bit of healthy worry.
Exactly. It can actually be a good thing in small doses. It helps you stay focused and avoid potential problems.
Okay, and then there's that attention residue, which we talked about earlier.
Right. It's that mental residue that's left behind when we switch between tasks. So like we said, multitasking isn't as efficient as it seems because you're leaving a little bit of your focus on each task you switch away from.
But focusing on one thing at a time is really key.
Absolutely. And it's about creating those systems that help us stay focused, like minimizing distractions and creating a dedicated workspace.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from those sneaky self-sabotaging tactics to actually building systems that support us, and even strategically doing nothing.
And don't forget about those really practical tools like temptation bundling and the 40-70 rule. There's so much in this book that can help you actually achieve those goals you've been dreaming of.
Absolutely. And what I love about this book is that it's not about rigidly following every single piece of advice. It's about figuring out what works for you, what resonates with your personality, your work style, your specific goals.
That's what makes this book so valuable. It gives you the framework, but it also empowers you to kind of make it your own. Experiment with different approaches and discover what helps you thrive.
I love that. It's about being curious, about experimenting, about becoming like a scientist of your own productivity, figuring out what really works for you.
It's like building a support structure, for your willpower.
Huh.
Habits, routines, those kinds of things that help you stay on track, even when you just don't feel like it.
Like a backup plan for when motivation goes MIA. I like that.
Right. And the book has this neat idea, keeping a scrubboard for yourself. Tracking your progress, those little wins, maybe even having some rewards. It kind of taps into that part of us that likes to win, to see those results.
Makes it feel more real, Like, I love those visual trackers. You can actually see how far you've come.
Exactly. And then there's time management, of course, creating those routines, minimizing distractions, really thinking about how much time things actually take.
It's more than just being busy.
Oh, for sure. It's being strategic, making sure your time goes to what truly matters. The book uses this phrase, lowering your transaction costs. It's basically making it easier to do what you want and harder to do what you don't.
Oh, I love that. Like, if you want to work out in the morning, you lay out your clothes the night before. One less hurdle.
Exactly. Another system is gathering everything you need for a project up front before you start.
Oh, that's smart. It's like that feeling when you have to stop mid-flow to search for something. Kills the momentum.
Right. The book compares it to carrying in all the groceries in one trip. You're prepared. You're ready to go. Now, it also talks about these deadly pitfalls, those common mistakes we all make that can really derail us.
It's almost comforting to know they're common. Like, oh, it's not just me.
Totally. One is false hope syndrome, setting those unrealistic expectations, then feeling bummed when we don't meet them, which, let's face it, happens.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
It's good to aim high, but gotta be realistic too.
For sure. The book stresses setting achievable goals, being kind to yourself when you stumble. It's progress over perfection, right?
Absolutely. It's not about never messing up. It's about what we do after we mess up. That's what matters.
Another pitfall, and I think we're all guilty of this, is overthinking.
Oh, big time. That could totally stop you in your tracks.
It's that analysis paralysis, right? Thinking so much you never act. The book talks about how too many choices can make us anxious, and then we end up doing nothing.
Makes sense. It's like when there are too many ice cream flavors, you end up walking away without any.
Exactly. The book suggests setting deadlines, even fake ones, to break out of that overthinking cycle.
That's clever. Force yourself to make a choice.
Right. And related to that is worry, which can really zap your energy. The book reminds us we can't control everything. Dwelling on what might go wrong just makes things worse.
Okay, so if we're not supposed to worry, what should we do?
Focus on what you can control, take action now, channel that energy into actually doing something.
So being proactive instead of letting worry take over. I like that.
And finally, the book really hammers home this idea of knowing thyself, understanding how you work best, what you prefer, even why you failed in the past.
Like taking a good, hard look in the mirror.
Exactly, because, like that saying goes, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. By understanding those past mistakes, we can make better choices going forward.
So figuring out what time of day works best for you, what kind of environment helps you focus, even what keeps you motivated. It's about creating that personalized productivity plan.
Exactly. It's like making a user manual for your own brain, figuring out what makes you tick. Now, I'm curious, what really stood out to you? What connected with your own experiences, your goals?
So we've really unpacked a lot from finish what you start, From recognizing those sneaky ways we sabotage ourselves to creating systems that actually help us take action. It's like we've built a whole toolbox for getting things done.
Right. And it's filled with all these cool strategies like that temptation bundling we talked about or that 40-70 rule. It's all about equipping you to finally achieve those things you've been dreaming of.
And the best part, it's not about following some rigid set of rules. It's about taking what resonates with you, with your personality and goals.
Exactly. The book gives you this great foundation, but it also encourages you to make it your own. Try different things, see what sticks, and figure out what helps you thrive.
It's like we were saying earlier, becoming a scientist of your own productivity.
Love that analogy. And I think the book leaves us with this really powerful question. Knowing yourself, like truly knowing yourself, is key for productivity. So think about it. When do you work best? What kind of environment helps you focus?
Those answers might surprise you. I know I've discovered some things about my own work style that I never would have guessed before.
It's so easy to assume there's one right way to do things, but the truth is, what works for one person might not work for another. It's all about tuning into your own rhythms and finding what helps you get into that flow state.
It's a journey of self-discovery, and that's part of what makes it so exciting.
Couldn't agree more. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Finish What You Start. We hope you've walked away with some practical tips and hopefully a renewed sense of motivation to tackle those goals you've been putting off.
Don't forget, it's a marathon, not a sprint. There will be bumps in the road.
Yeah.
But the key is to keep learning, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep moving forward.
And if you're feeling inspired to go even deeper, we highly recommend checking out the book itself. There's so much more to explore, and we're confident you'll find even more gems that resonate with you.
Definitely. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time for another exciting deep dive into a new and fascinating topic.